The city of Urgench, 1221. Urgench was one of the most important cities in Central Asia, capital of the Khwarezm Empire, a major stop on the Silk Road, genuinely wealthy and well populated. The Mongols besieged it, broke through the walls, and then did something that tells you everything about how they operated. They divided the surviving population among their soldiers. Every Mongol warrior received somewhere between 20 and 30 prisoners to execute personally, not collectively, personally. This was deliberate. It distributed the act across the entire army, made every man individually responsible, and ensured the killing was thorough in a way that a centralized execution couldn't guarantee. Historians estimate somewhere between a million and 1.2 million people died at Urgench. The city was then flooded by redirecting the Amudarya River over the ruins. They didn't just destroy it, they erased the ground it stood on. And here's what you need to understand about why they did it that way. Genghis Khan has specific strategic logic around terror that was almost coldly rational. A city that surrendered immediately was treated with relative leniency. Taxed, absorbed, kept functional. A city that resisted and then fell, obliterated. The message being sent to every other city in the region was explicit. The cost of resistance is everything: your buildings, your people, your history, the very land your city sat on. Surrender or cease to exist.
It worked, repeatedly. Cities would hear what happened to the last place that resisted and open their gates before the Mongols even arrived. But the methodology, it wasn't always mass execution. Sometimes it was worse, in the sense that it was more personal and more drawn out. Take what happened to Sultan Muhammad II of Khwarezm, the man whose empire Genghis Khan dismantled. Muhammad had made a catastrophic mistake. He'd executed a Mongol trade delegation and the merchants traveling with them, roughly 450 people, on suspicion of espionage. Genghis Khan sent 3 ambassadors to formally protest. Muhammad executed one and sent the other 2 back with their beards shaped up, a profound humiliation in Mongol culture. That was the trigger for one of the most total destructions of a civilization in human history. But as for Muhammad himself, Genghis Khan didn't just want him dead. He sent his 2 best generals, Jebe and Subutai, on a mission with essentially one instruction: find him, chase him until he can't run anymore. They pursued Muhammad across his own empire, city to city, with a force specifically dedicated to that single objective. Muhammad died on a small island in the Caspian Sea, reportedly destitute, having watched his entire empire collapse around him while being personally hunted across it. Now, this other story is even more terrifying. Nishapur was a major Persian city. It surrendered to the Mongols, then revolted. During that revolt, a Mongol prince, Tokachar, who happened to be Genghis Khan's son-in-law, was killed by an arrow from the city walls. When the Mongols retook Nishapur, Tokachar's widow personally requested to oversee the retribution. The accounts of what followed are, I'll be straightforward about this, among the most disturbing in medieval historical literature. The city was systematically massacred. And then, reportedly, to ensure no one had survived by hiding among the dead, the Mongols separated the heads from the bodies and stacked them in 3 separate pyramids: men in one pile, women in another, children in a third. As for the pyramid's skulls, this wasn't unique to Nishapur. It was a recurring Mongol practice across multiple campaigns: psychological warfare, visible from a distance, impossible to misinterpret.
Now let's talk about what happened to the Tangut people, because this one sits differently than the others. The Western Shia dynasty, the Tanguts, had been vassals of the Mongol Empire for years. They'd failed to send troops when Genghis Khan needed them for his campaign against the Khwarezmian Empire, citing a lack of resources. That was the excuse. The real message from the Mongol perspective was defiance. Genghis Khan returned to deal with them personally in 1226. He was in his mid-60s at this point, already aging by the brutal standards of a life spent on campaign. He died during the campaign, the exact cause still debated, but he gave specific instructions before he died. The Tanguts were to be destroyed, not defeated, not absorbed, destroyed as a people. His orders were carried out after his death. The Western Shia capital was razed, the royal family executed, and the Tangut civilization, their language, their literature, their Buddhist temples, their records, systematically dismantled. The Tanguts as a distinct people essentially ceased to exist within a generation. We know they existed primarily because of what the Mongols left behind in their destruction and what archaeologists have recovered since. An entire civilization erased as a final act of a dying man's will. Now, I want to circle back to something because I think it's easy to watch all of this pile up and just go numb to it. 40 to 60 million dead. That number is so large it stops meaning anything. So let me give you a different frame. Researchers have studied the atmospheric carbon record from the 13th century, trees, ice cores, sediment layers, and there is a measurable dip in atmospheric CO2 that corresponds to the period of the Mongol conquests. The current leading explanation for that dip is that so much farmland was abandoned because the farmers were dead that forests and vegetation regrew over previously cultivated land, absorbing carbon at a scale large enough to register in global atmospheric data. The Mongol conquests left a mark on the planet's atmosphere. That's not a metaphor. That's a thing that actually happened that scientists can measure. Back to the methodology, because there's one more practice worth understanding. What the Mongols did to water infrastructure. Central Asia's agricultural civilization was built on irrigation, the Qanat systems, underground channels that moved water from mountain sources to farmland across miles of arid terrain, had taken centuries to construct and were the literal foundation of city life across the region. The Mongols, when they took a city that had resisted, didn't just kill the people and burn the buildings. They destroyed the Qanats. This meant that even if survivors returned, even if refugees came back years later, the agricultural foundation was gone. Cities that had supported hundreds of thousands of people became uninhabitable. The land reverted. Some regions of Central Asia that were densely populated and agriculturally sophisticated in the early 13th century didn't recover to comparable population levels until the 20th century. 700 years. That's what a thorough enough destruction looks like when it targets infrastructure rather than just people. You don't just kill the generation that resisted, you set back the next 20 or 30 generations. Genghis Khan didn't invent cruelty. Every era has had its atrocities, its massacres, its destroyed cities. What made the Mongol conquests distinct was the scale, the consistency, and the deliberateness of it. This wasn't soldiers running amok. This was policy, executed with military precision by an organization that had thought carefully about what total destruction actually required. The pyramids of skulls were a message. The flooded ruins were a message. The hunted sultan dying on a Caspian island was a message. The destroyed irrigation systems were a message. The message was simple, and it worked. Don't make us come back.